All right, so just to answer your question about type, there's a couple of ways you could do it. So this is probably the most direct, but not my recommended way of doing it. But if you are not interested in training yourself how to use vector graphics, then this is probably one of the ways to do it. I'm using Sketchbook because Sketchbook has some tools that programs like Photoshop don't really have. Although with Photoshop you can kind of do something similar to what I would do in Illustrator, but then if you're going to do that, you might as well use Illustrator, okay, which is using vector graphics. But so if you're not into that at all, I'm doing like this. The simplest program you can use. This is actually a tablet version of the program as well, so it comes with the mobile kind of tools. So again, because I'm trying to make it as simple as possible, just in case, just trying to work out what software you're using here. I think you're using Photoshop, but yeah, you could do it in Photoshop, but then you would probably be wanting to do vector graphics, and if you're going to do vector graphics, you might as well use Illustrator because it's much more powerful for that kind of artwork. In any case, so say for instance you wanted to do this fork kind of wording. Sorry. Oh, come on, just zoom in. Right. So say I wanted to focus on the F, right? So you just want to perfect it a little bit so that it's nice and clean around the edges and so on and so forth. So a tool like this would have rulers. It's got this thing here is actually very much, it's called a drag, it's called a curve. This is very much like a French curve. So it allows you to be able to adjust curves and increase and decrease the size of things and move them around as well. You can rotate the whole thing as well, right? So it's very much like a French curve. It's the old school vector graphics tool. So before Illustrator and CorelDRAW and all of those programs came out, these were the types of tools that you would use to perfect your artwork. So for instance, it depends on the styling that you want as well. But say this F is actually not 100% straight, so it's a little bit curved in the bottom here. I'll undo that, right? And so I could kind of try and perfect that curve a little bit like that, right? And so what I could do is use maybe a pen nib. Let's take a look at this so without anything. So that's just like a kind of like a fine pen nib, and I could increase or decrease the size by using this little panel over here. So increase, decrease. So I would go for something fine like this. Now, and the other thing I should note, so I basically just took your screenshot that you sent me, and I'm loading this up. I've had to increase the resolution because it was fairly low res, so it's pretty hard to kind of perfect something when it's quite low res. Okay, so going back to this, so that's quite fine. So now what I can do is kind of draw in, and in fact, sorry, the other thing I should do is open up my layers, which is right here. I'm going to create a new layer, right? So this tool also has layers. So I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to kind of make a little drawing like this. So this is Sketchbook Pro, or Sketchbook they call it now. It's totally free. You can just download it using an iPad for it, or you can get the desktop version. Again, the desktop version is totally free. Used to, I kind of got upset because I paid for it earlier. So I was paying subscription for it, and now the whole thing is completely free. Okay, so what I'm doing is basically just, depending on how straight I want this to be, how straight I want this to be, like do I want it to be kind of semi-curved or do I want it to be straight? Depends on the style, right? But basically all I'm doing is lining this up and say I want it to be kind of a little bit curved like this thing here. There we go, and maybe join up to that. So now I can create that going around here, and same thing on this side here. So I don't know, do you want it straight or do you want it a little bit curved? Right, so it's a little bit curved like that. I'm just following your sketch. I mean, I know that it might not be the exact idea of what you're after, but I'm gonna just straighten that out. And so I'll just keep doing. This is I was trained. My early training was actually to do things on a drafting table. So graphic designers used to use drafting tables to do this kind of work. And architects used to use drafting tables. Now they tend to use, except for the old school architects, they tend to use software for all this stuff, right? So it's all been replaced. And I might just... And of course, then what we would probably want to do is curve out. I don't like you have it. You do have a limit as to how much you can curve using this tool. So what you could do if you want to curve out the ends is maybe use the protractor tool instead. So this ellipse tool is like a protractor. So what I can do is kind of scale, stretch and squash, reposition just to get that curve ending there. Rotate around. I'm doing all this with my finger, by the way. I'm using my Surface Book, which is also a tablet, to do this. So, and of course, I'm using a stylus to draw. There we go. Probably a little bit too much then. Oops, I really have to be careful. There we go. There. Okay, so if I hide the backing, you can see that this is what I'm doing. I'm kind of starting to perfect here, and I don't know why it drew there. I hate that. Sometimes it just draws where I don't want it to. There. That's why it's good to check as well. Okay, and move this across here, rotate it around. And it depends what it is that you're trying to do. You might not want exactly this. It might have just been really rough and just getting an idea of what you want. Right, and I can move this. Now I'm only going to do one letter because I don't want to spend too much time doing this. Right, I've got a lot of students to answer questions to at this time of the this time of the year or the semester. There's so many students asking questions on how to do stuff. Okay, so there we go. And obviously I don't want that, so I can get rid of this, turn it off. I can use the eraser tool. And I can, oops, way too big. So I want that to be a lot finer. And I might use the ruler in this case, just, oops, why? I didn't want to turn the ruler around. Okay, just so I can use the ruler to kind of erase about where I'd like this to be erased, about there. Oh, I don't know what's gone over. No. Might have to push this across a little bit. I actually didn't mean to push the graphic across. I wanted to push the... Oh my god, okay. It does depend on the thickness, so I'm going to go for a really thin rubber. Maybe go for that line there. Yep, that'll do. Right, switch that off, and then I can use the rest of the eraser to wipe this out. And, I can manually draw in, or I can use the ruler again at that angle to kind of... So it really depends what you're planning to do. So you could draw it in like this, and then what you could do is just fill it all in, right? So I don't think Sketchbook has a filling in tool like Photoshop does. So the great thing about this program is you can just save it as a Photoshop file. So I can actually go export and change it to a Photoshop and open it up in Photoshop and then do whatever you want to it. So yeah, really easy with this program. Or I could, use a brush and brush in what I wanted as well. But that takes time. So sometimes it's easier just to fill it in Photoshop. Just quickly, I'll just show you what that what that can do. So I can export this as a Photoshop file, and I'll make sure that I'm in the right place for this. I'm just going to put it on the desktop. I've got a mess on the desktop at the moment. It's not an interface. I'll just call it logo. Right, and I don't like how this is happening. So I want Photoshop. Sorry, it's not. My recorder's kind of, I've told it I only want it to record one screen because otherwise it'd take up a huge amount of memory to record two. But I can't see things other than that application at the moment, which is kind of a bit crappy. So I'm just waiting for Photoshop to load. Hopefully Photoshop loads without a problem. Yeah, okay, there you go. All right, and so with Photoshop, I'm just going to open up the file from the desktop. Oh, come on, where are you? There you are. I can open that up, and it opens it up in Photoshop, as you can see. It keeps going on the crop tool. There it is in Photoshop. Right, and I've got layers. It supports those layers. So that's why I like this tool. I like it a lot for coming up with some quick sketches, and then I'll finalize it in Photoshop. And so what I can do in Photoshop is use, say, the paint bucket. So paint bucket with whatever color I want, like black, for instance. And I can fill it in like that. Probably a bit too much. Tolerance 10. So because there's anti-aliasing in the see if I can see. I don't really want that roughness coming out of it though. That doesn't look good at all. Well, I can do that and then just paint the rest, I suppose. Don't like how it did that though. That's not very nice. So I can just use, say, Photoshop with a hard brush to fill in the rest of that. I think it's actually probably a really big brush at the moment. Oh, there it is. Yeah. So I'm making a small brush, and then I can go in and paint making sure that I've got it at 100% opacity. I can paint in the rest. So this will allow, I mean, it's a process though. If that's, if that's kind of a little more direct for you, that's fine. The other tool is Illustrator, but that requires, if you don't know how to use Illustrator, it requires a little bit of, what's going on? Why can't I see? Sometimes it won't let me see the brush size, which I don't like. Yeah, so it still takes a little bit of work to kind of fill it all in. Smoothing, flow, opacity. Okay, I don't understand why it's being a pain to paint with. Okay, so that's one way. Just get rid of that. Right, so that's one way to perfect your artwork, so that it's following the same style that you had originally with your drawing there. Okay, but you're perfecting it. You're making it look a little bit nicer. Okay, so that's one way. The other way is Illustrator, and I recommend Illustrator, although it does require a little bit more work. Okay, so what have I got? I don't have Sketchbook on anymore. Okay, that's good. So if I open up Illustrator, okay, so I'll just bring Illustrator in here. I've got two screens on at the moment. Okay. And then what I'll do is I'll create a new document. So don't drag it straight into Illustrator. I wouldn't recommend you do that at all. Okay, and I'm going to make it A4. You can make it A3 if you like. I don't understand these point values with millimeters. I don't know why it does that. But anyway, A4 or A3, it doesn't really matter. I'm making it landscape. And then once I've created that document, I'm going to bring it in so that I can make a template out of this, right? So I'm going to go File, Place. I'm going to bring in from the desktop, which is where I've got it. Oh. Where did I put it? Oh, well, I'll just use the logo one, but show import previous option, sorry, so that I can. Oh, why didn't it show the import options? What is wrong with you? Place. Logo. Oh, it's not giving me the import options. Why are you not giving me the import options? Oh man, there's one thing I don't like about it. So I'll save that. And I'll bring it in that way. Because you should get import options which allow you to control which layers to place. But anyway, for some reason it won't let me do it. I'm going to bring it in again. So logo. I'll just put it in about like that. Okay, so this this file here, I can then trace over. So what I would do is right-click this layer. Why are you not letting me right-click? Oh, actually, you can't right-click layers in Illustrator. Double-click the layer, and then I want to tick template, and I want to name it template. I can call it whatever I want, but oops. Not template, template. Click OK, and so now this becomes locked. I can't touch it, and if I create a new layer, I can now start drawing. So this would be my suggestion because it's so much easier once you get to know how Illustrator works, that is. So with this, again, I would be tracing around this rather than trying to look at the artwork on the side and then trying to recreate it. Illustrator is better at tracing. So I'd be using the pen tool. All right, so the pen tool is the tool I'm just pointing at here. And what you can do, it requires a little bit of experience. So you could have separate lines for this whole F, but what I would do, the way I'd do this is I'd create like the L shape for it, okay? And I'm using the Alt key to break the balance so that I'm creating this kind of shape like that. And you can see that I'm going to hit return to finish that stroke or that outline, but you can see it's got a fill in it, so I want to get rid of that fill. So I'm going to choose the fill there and get rid of it. And then I can go to my stroke settings. The stroke settings is the thickness of the outline. So I can go to Window and Strokes, or Stroke, sorry. Window and Stroke, which is here. I've got it here, so it pops up here. And then I can change the thickness of that stroke like that. I'm using the up and down arrow keys. Now, yours is rounded at the end, so I'm not sure if you want it rounded or not. There's a couple of ways to control roundness as well. So under corner, I can actually tell Illustrator to render the corner as a rounded corner. And under the cap, I can tell Illustrator to render the end bits as rounded, right? So then you can see that I've got something similar to what you've got there drawn, okay? And then, again, with the pen tool, click, hold, and drag, click, hold, and drag, that will create that bit, right? So you can perfect your letters quite easily using this tool. And again, don't try, so in your case, I wouldn't be using, you can use the ellipse tool to create circles, but the thing is it's too perfect, right? So it doesn't really match your style. So again, I would be using the pen tool. click, hold and drag. Now I'm going to switch off the smart guides and delete that. Smart guides are really useful for construction, but not for drawing. So I'm going to untick smart guides. That's usually on by default under view, smart guides. That way it's not snapping onto anything. Click, hold and drag across here. Click, hold and drag across here. Click, hold and drag across here. Click, hold and drag across here and finish it off here. And then we can kind of, adjust this to suit so that we've got something that, like an O that's not super perfect, that's kind of more hand drawn, but still quite smooth. Yeah. Adjust that a little bit. So I can always go using the direct selection tool, the white arrow, that allows me to adjust the control points, or these points here and their handles. The handles control the curve. Okay. So same thing with this. And again, you'd plan it, right? So you could do all of this in maybe 2 lines, but I would do it all in one in this case, right? So I could go from this bottom part of the R, I could go all the way around to here, then all the way around to about here. Then I'd break it. So holding the Option key lets me break as I hold the mouse or the trackpad. And then over here I'd create like a small curve. And again, if you're not happy with it exactly as it is, which I'm not, I can adjust it. So I can go in and adjust it later on. But the beauty of vector graphics is it's always clean. So it's always sharp and it's always clean. Same thing with this. Now this would be 2 pieces. So I'd have one line going across here and then a V shape. And notice how I go in one direction when I do this. You don't go in 2 directions. So you don't go in this direction and go back this way, because then you get a knot. I hit return when I'm finishing a line. So from there to about here, and then break it, holding down the Option or the Alt key, and break it here. So you can see, what you can achieve with vector graphics. So that's what I love about vector graphics. You can change the colors as well later on if you like. So I can choose the stroke here. I can go to my double click this to choose a color, or I can go to my swatches and to choose a color. All right. So lots you can do with that. And the same thing with this fork and the spoon. So with the fork, you draw that in easily. Right, so, and where you want to start really, I usually start on a corner like this, okay, and then, and I've had years of experience doing this, so don't think that, I just make it look easy. It's not, vector graphics is not easy unless you've had a fair bit of practice. So I want to change that stroke thickness if I can while I'm drawing. Maybe something like that. Okay, and I'm going to draw over here, draw this way. Oh, the thickness has gone back again. That's not good. Right, try that again. I'll hit enter and hopefully that'll avoid me from getting it thick again. There. I can always adjust some of these curves if I'm not happy with them. Go over to this one, go over to here, break that, so holding down the Option key, and then I can create, you can always zoom in and out as you draw as well. I'm using a mouse because vector graphics was actually made for a mouse, so you can actually be faster and a lot quicker with a mouse than you could with a trackpad or with a stylus. I'm going to hold down the Option or the Alt key, click, hold and drag to break that in. And you can see that I've created that shape. And all I need to do is use the direct selection tool, the white arrow, to go in and adjust bits so that they kind of match, in a way, match the drawing. And or you might not want it to match your drawing. You might want it to kind of look more like what Illustrator's doing. I don't know, it's up to you. Sometimes you need to add more points if you want to control things. So for instance here, I want a little bit more control in here, and here I want a little bit more control as well. So I'm going to use the pen tool, put my cursor over the top of the line, and you can see it's got a little plus sign, click. That's going to allow me to add a point on that curve, on that stroke. Right? And so now I can adjust this and bring this out if I wanted to. This one, adjust it there, and now bring this out as well so that I have more rounded ends. So the same thing with this one and maybe this one. Then I'm using shortcut keys, but I'm using the direct selection tool to switch between those. So P for the pen tool, and A for the direct selection tool, and V for the standard selection tool. If you put your cursor over any of these tools, you can see the shortcut key for it. P, add a point there, move this across here and pull this out. So like I said, it takes a bit of experience to kind of work out what tool to use and when to use it and how to use it. Right? But that's basically what I would do. You could also draw this, or you could draw this in two pieces or draw it in one piece. This is completely curved, so I'm just going to start at the top here. I can use the space bar. If I created a point and I don't like where it is, I can use the space bar to reposition it. So I'm holding the space bar down, reposition, and then once I let go of the space bar, I can continue to draw. It's really nice for being able to kind of adjust, you know, where you want those points to go while you're drawing. So, I mean, I would recommend that you stick to the style of your drawing. I know that you might probably want to perfect it a bit, but sometimes the style itself just brings in that little bit of character that you want. So I'm going to just leave that like that and come back to it and adjust it. So I can shrink that and bring it in a little bit like that, and I can increase that and bring it out a bit like that. Maybe bring this in a bit. Pretty close. There you go. So I've done all those shapes, and the same thing with all of these. You can even with these guys, you can actually convert these all to actual shapes as well. So at the moment, they're just paths. So paths with thick strokes. I can grab all of this and go object, path, outline, stroke, and now they're shapes. So if I look at the outline view for this, which is view outline, you can see that the strokes are just lines like this with a thick border around them. And this one here is actually a series of shapes. And then what I can do with those is I can select the two, I can switch to my shape builder tool, and if I hold down the shift key, that lets me join them all together. Right? So now this is a shape, and it's not just a stroke, it's actually a shape. I would do that at the end though, once I've perfected it the way I wanted. That's just so I could do the same thing for that. Object, path. You don't have to though, if you're happy with it as is. But sometimes I get a little more control over, you know, the actual shape, and I can customize it a bit more. Outline, stroke. So this one here is one as well. So object, path, outline, stroke. Right, so that becomes that. This is two paths. So object, path, outline, stroke, and I would join them together. So select the two, shape builder tool, shift to make a marquee selection of the lot. There you go. So there's some that are a little more complicated, like for instance, actually none of them really are that complicated. This can all be done in one piece as well. How well it comes out when you do the outline stroke sometimes is a bit of a guess. So I'm just going to switch to just the stroke here. something like that. And of course, you can always readjust it and get it to be a little more accurate to what you've drawn, but you might not. You might want to perfect it a little bit more. So with that, under my stroke, I can make it thick again, so it kind of matches. Make sure that I've got rounded corners, or rounded ends, rounded caps. Select it all and go to Object, Path, Outline, Stroke, and it's perfectly made that, right? So yeah, so there you go. Hopefully this helps you to be able to perfect your artwork from your roughs. So this is a nice way to be able to do it. My recommendation is to use Illustrator, but if you don't want to, you can still use other programs like I showed you there with Sketchbook and Photoshop. But you can see it's a little bit more tedious to do. So it's quite direct, but it's more tedious to do than with something like Illustrator. Illustrator is great if you know what you're doing, but if you haven't had practice with these tools, then it can be frustrating to know where to plot the points, which direction to go, all that kind of stuff. So really it's up to you. My suggestion is that if you don't know how to use Illustrator and you need to practice first, do a lynda.com tutorial. You've still got 2 weeks, so do a real quick lynda.com tutorial. Actually, I think it's called now LinkedIn Learning, I think. But they're still lynda.com. And with the LinkedIn Learning videos, there's some quick guides on how to use Illustrator and how to practice. So my suggestion to you would be to do that if that's what you're aiming at doing. Anyway, okay, I'm going to stop the recording and hopefully this helped you.